Hi, and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here, we host a distinguished guest, and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran writing a vicious email to your day-to-day manager about the subpar catering at the amphitheater, or else a scrappy upstart begging the promoter for more than a $10 dinner buyout, this is your show, because ultimately it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, it's the second Friday of May 2023, and I thank you for joining us. This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. I'm old enough to remember when you had to pay a web developer to get a website made. And it would always be some guy named Tucker who drove a Dodge Caliber with just primer paint on the exterior and temporary tags, and who was always trying to sell you what he called designer drugs, but which were actually just crushed up Klonopin pills he stole from his stepmom. And old Tucker would charge you about $1,000 for a website that would be obsolete in 6 months. But it's the future now, you guys. That's not how it works anymore. We're allowed to have nice things now. One of those nice things is Bandzoogle. Bandzoogle powers the websites of tens of thousands of musicians around the world, from weekend warriors to Grammy winners. All the features you need for a professional website are already built in. Hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates. This year, Bandzoogle would like to congratulate its members on surpassing $100 million in commission-free sales through their websites. The Working Songwriter podcast listeners can go to bandzoogle.com to try it for free for 30 days. Use the promo code TWS, the initials of our show, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. If you'd like to hear some of my music live in the coming weeks, you can check out my tour page, joepugmusic.com/tour, where there are a bevy of new tour dates posted all around the country, from Sellersville, Pennsylvania, to Pioneertown, California. Finally, if you enjoy this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here's a couple things that you could do to help. First, you could become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows you to directly support creative endeavors that you find meaningful. You just head to their site, Patreon, you search for The Working Songwriter, or you search for my name, and then you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month for the show. Think of it as a voluntary subscription, a subscription that you certainly don't have to pay for, but that you choose to pay for because you dig the show and because you won't miss a few bucks at the end of the month. If just 1% of our listenership kicked in the price of a cup of coffee every month, it would make an immense difference. So thank you to all of our listeners who have taken the time and the capital to support the show in that way. If you're not in a place where you can contribute in that way, there's still a couple ways that you could help us out for free. First, you could leave us a rating in the iTunes store. That's free. Or second, you could just tell a friend about the show. Spread the word about the show. The simple math on those two things is that they will help me much more than they will be a pain in the ass for you. Okay, I'll end all the harassment there. I hope you dig this week's episode. Our guest this week hails from West Virginia and still calls it home now. Charles Wesley Godwin grew up not with a dream to prowl the stage, but with a dream to prowl the secondary of the West Virginia Mountaineers football team. That didn't pan out, but instead, he's found a place for himself in the firmament of American music, and we're all the richer for it. His 2019 debut, Seneca, heralded a promising new songwriting voice, and his sophomore album, How the Mighty Fall, delivered on that promise, bringing him to the national stage. His music is currently a staple on roots music playlists across all of the streaming services. He's toured with Shane Smith and the Saints, Trampled by Turtles, Zach Bryan, and Cody Jinks. Rolling Stone has said that his voice, with its tight, old-world vibrato, is perfect. Billboard has noted that his works are studded with vivid language and scenic ambiance. I got a chance to catch up with Charles on the phone last week and hear about his journey so far. Charles Wesley Godwin, thanks so much for being a part of the Working Songwriter. We have so many guests on this podcast where I begin the interview by saying, you're from such and such small town, but now you live in Nashville, Tennessee. You're from, Tulsa. Now you live in Los Angeles. With you, I think I can fairly say you're from West Virginia, and you're still in West Virginia now. Is that correct?
That's right, bud. Yeah, never left. Never been a city person.
Are you in Charleston? Is that where you're at?
No, I'm outside of Morgantown.
You're in Morgantown. That's right.
Yeah, born and raised here in Morgantown, and my wife and I, we got a nice little spot outside of town.
So what did music look like for you growing up there in West Virginia? Do you think you were being exposed to certain stuff that maybe someone else from a different part of the country wouldn't have been?
Yeah, honestly, Joe, I wasn't very musical growing up. Nobody in my family played. I was just, playing sports, hanging out with my friends and stuff. And music was just always this like peripheral thing that was just kind of, something that was always around. There's always bluegrass music around, where I grew up, a lot of rock music inside of Morgantown. And I never really paid too much attention to it, honestly, until I got into college and, I picked up a guitar as a hobby, and then I kind of became enthralled by it.
Right on. So what were you listening to then growing up? Like, what was one of the first experiences you remember with music where it really affected you in a serious way?
Something like that would be when I was a little kid, my dad would have oldies radio playing in the car, and it'd be like all the top 40 hits from like the 60s and 70s. And the Beatles are what stuck with me. Like, those songs would be stuck in my head for weeks at a time as a kid. And, something I really enjoyed, definitely in CCR, stuff like that. And it, be stuck in my head. I really enjoyed it, but then I, just never really thought about it any more than that. And then I never even sang in church growing up. I just assumed that I couldn't sing.
To me, the sound of oldies radio in the 1990s is specifically CCR. Like, that's it. You know what I mean? Like,
it was
was the vibe.
That was like the coolest radio station ever. I mean, it just played like really, really good stuff. And yeah, that's what my dad would listen to all the time, his little red Ford Ranger as we were going around town on the weekend.
I think that's a cool influence to have, because so much of that stuff, particularly CCR, I guess it'd be different than the Beatles, but particularly like that and that oldies radio stuff, the recordings of it come across so well on the radio. They're just very simple. The vocals way out front, the snare drums way out front, and then there's some melodic elements, but they're just very simple and beautiful in that way.
Yeah, and I mean, that was all to tape. Those boys were doing that stuff in one, those are one takers, I think, I don't think there's too much going back and redoing any parts with on that tape. So it's pretty amazing.
No, I think the most they could do, I think the most they could do is, like, if you had two takes and you like the first 75% of one take and the last 25%, they could literally cut the tape and put it together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Which is insane. I mean, that's wild to think about how meticulous that would have been to do that type of stuff.
It is. I talked to older engineers who say they used to have this little box, and it was like the same way that you'd have like a miter box with a saw where you can have 45-degree angles for like cutting wood. Mm-hmm. There'd be like a little tiny box for a razor blade. So you would cut on a 45-degree angle on the one tape and 45 degrees in the other way for the other tape, and then put them together. And so it was quite literally, physically a crossfade. The two 45 degrees were crossing in the same place.
Can you imagine how many good takes have never seen the light of day because there was a mistake made on that end? Imagine how many like amazing takes are just in the trash can way back in the day because somebody made a bad cut.
Someone made a bad cut, man. And now it's gone the complete opposite direction. We've recorded stuff now where there's like forensic audio software that can go in and take out like a droning fan in the background, or to say nothing of, auto-tune if you want to use it, or quantizing beats. I mean, it's amazing the level of control you can now have with audio.
Yeah, and even with tape. We just did my new album. We just recorded it in January, and it's all to tape. And,
really?
Yep, it's all to tape, 100%. But even then, in the studio, we're able to then print,
yes,
through the board onto digital. So then we get, we're like, take one and two were really good. Let's print these two. And, let's say we keep take two, and there's like, I say a certain word flat in a verse, and my producer Al's like, no worries, you sang it right, and, take one, and puts that in, and then all the tape hiss is a little bit loud, like, let me work on that. And then he can bring the hiss down. So even with tape nowadays, it's still, there's so many options there to be able to fix it or polish it or something like that. It's pretty amazing. They things sound that good back then without having any of that stuff at their disposal.
Just hearing you describe that method, I feel like that's a really good in between, because sometimes I don't want all the options that I have with digital recording because it makes me not make decisions. But at the same time, you hate to let go of a take that is complete magic where you said, one line in the third verse, you sang kind of flat and you can't live with it. And what does that mean? I have to throw out the whole take now? That's a bummer. So that seems like a really good in between that you're working with there.
Yeah. Yeah. I this is the first time I had the luxury of being able to do that. And I loved it. Everything I've done in the past, I couldn't afford to be in a studio that I could have all my guys in the same place. So we had to do the thing where it's, drums and bass, and I'm singing scratch. And then after that's done, then I go back in and try to get the take. And that turns into singing the same song, between 10 and 20 times. And sometimes, I couldn't go for it until the 12th take, which, by the time you've done something 12 times, it doesn't feel quite as you can't put your emotions into it quite the same way as you did the first and the second. And with this time, we were all able to fit in the same room and have people in ISO booths that needed to be ISO'd. We'd work through the song beforehand. Drums, Joe and Nate would be like, all right, we're good to go for it. Let's go for it. I go in the ISO booth, and then from take one, we're laying it down on tape. And this happened on a number of songs. First take, I'm like, I can't do it any better than that, guys. I'm happy with it. And then if some of the other guys made a little mistake or they think they could do better, then they can go back over and record over their track on tape. But mine was done, so it was so much more enjoyable to me to be able to just do it 1, 2, or 3 times and, love one of those and just be like, all right, I'm good to go. You guys finish up, do your thing, tell you're happy, and then we'll move on.
Sometimes I feel like there's a difference between songwriters and musicians in that musicians that I know who aren't songwriters, who are just musicians, they love playing stuff over and over and over again. Me, as a songwriter, it sounds like you as well, like it's the bane of my existence to play a song over and over. I'm at a point now, I pick up new bandmates for every tour, and I'm just at a point now where I email them beforehand, and I'm like, look, I'm not going to do a rehearsal with you because I can't sing these songs again. Like I've sang these songs for 15 years. I'm not going to go in and rehearse a song that I wrote 15 years ago. So you need to figure that out. But there is something to that, though, man. Just wanting to do it that one time and saying, well, maybe I could do it better, but probably not. I mean, that's probably how it's going to sound,
Yeah, definitely to the point now where I have enough experience to know it doesn't get better after 15 takes. So I'm very, I guess I became very decisive with that. I know my voice. If it's a take where if I would be happy with it live, then it's good enough to go on the record, in my opinion. So if I do something, one of the takes, while we were recording January, after the fact, I kind of feel it and ask myself, if I would have just sang that, at a show, I feel really good about that. So that's good enough for me.
Yes.
So.
And that's how audiences hear it as well. The audiences aren't saying, man, that snare drum was a little late, 2 minutes and 45 seconds, and they're listening to the emotion in your voice. You know what I mean? That's what they're listening for. And you can have a perfectly gridded snare drum all the way through, and if the emotion in your voice isn't there, they'll just go, I didn't like that song.
100%. Yeah, it all comes down to, the words, the melody, the emotion, what the connect.
So to go backwards a little bit, we jumped ahead of ourselves a little bit there. To go backwards, you're growing up, you're listening to this oldies radio that was formative for you, that your dad had on in the car. And you mentioned in college, that's when things kind of changed for you, and music became something different than sort of just like a casual pleasure. Can you kind of describe how you began to become initiated in music in a different way?
Yeah, it all started with, I really wanted to play college football. Mm-hmm. And, long story short, I got injured in high school. Any scholarship opportunities went out the window, and I tried to walk on at West Virginia. And just plain simple, just was not good enough. I tried out 3 times and just never made it. And so eventually I kind of let, reality set in that dream was not going to happen. It just had to let it go and move on.
What was that process of accepting that like?
Joe, that was tough, buddy. Up until that point in my life, that was the dream. I wanted to be a Mountaineer football player and, make a big play on Saturday at home. That was the dream. It was hard to let that go. And it was also embarrassing too, because everybody I knew, my friends, my family, acquaintances in town, everybody knew what I was trying to do. So it's hard to face that, to know that everybody knows that you failed something. It was a humbling moment, and it changed me. At the time, I was like, this is terrible. But looking back, I was like, this is one of the best things that ever happened in my life.
How did it change you?
Feel that failure. It humbled me in a way that made me not scared to fail, because I'd already done it. So I guess it took off the training wheels with me going for something in the future. Because going for something like music, to be a singer-songwriter, and not to move to Nashville, Los Angeles, or New York, or Austin, that's tough, because there's no paved road there's no roadmap to figure out how to make that happen. And I wasn't scared to go for it, because I guess I already just failed miserably, in my life. So if it happened again, whatever, I knew what it felt like. But so. The whole football thing didn't work out. So here I was with all this free time for the first time in my, young adult life, in the evenings where I'm not training to try to make this football thing happen. And I'm like, man, I need a hobby. I hunt and fish, but I can't do that every day while I'm in college. I need to find something else, because this is watching Ghost Hunters isn't going to do it here in the evening. Zach Bagans ain't going to get me through the rest of my life here. I gotta get some more hobbies, So I picked up a guitar after I saw the Avett Brothers and Mumford & Sons play at the Grammys. I think it was 2011. I was like, man, that was amazing.
With Dylan.
Yeah.
And,
and I was like, man, that was great. Maybe I should pick up a guitar and maybe that would be something I can do in the evenings to kill some time. So I got my brother's old Jasmine Takamine out of his closet and just started kind of strumming on it, for 15, 20 minutes a night, and just never put it down. About a year later, I could string some chords together and started learning some little Avett Brothers songs or Old Crow Medicine Show songs and stuff like that. It's just, simple stuff I could play with some chords. And then I went on a study abroad to Estonia my junior year at WVU, and I'd practice in my room, and then my roommates would come in and listen to me play, and I was like, okay, whatever. I was okay enough to just do my thing still, and then kind of snowballed into me getting a gig over there, and my first gig was a fashion show where I had to fill 20 minutes. As the models were walking in this courtyard, and I got paid €150, and I was like, "This is the best work I've ever done in my life. This is it. This is what I'm gonna do for a living." So then, when I came back to West Virginia, I started playing bluegrass music with a couple college buddies of mine. We started getting bar gigs, and then from there, it kept rolling. And I knew that you have to have original music if you really want to do this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I started trying to write songs, and they were really bad for a long time, but that's kind of how the whole thing happened.
What do you think it is? I mean, because you described two scenarios there, like this football thing that had been your dream your whole life, and you put all these hopes and dreams and all this, frankly, pressure on that thing succeeding. The way that you're describing music now, which is something that you're now successful in a way that you never were with football, that starts in a completely different way where it almost seemed, I mean, you literally started it as an alternative to watching Ghost Hunters at night. You know what I mean? So there couldn't be something with less pressure on it at that point. How do you think that made the endeavor different in some ways? And do you think that added to the ability for it to be successful?
Yeah, it was just it was so enjoyable, and as I took each step towards trying to do it professionally and getting gigs, I found that I enjoyed each thing with the music, that I loved it. I was like, man, I actually love singing. This is really fun. And I like fiddling around on the guitar. And then I started writing songs. I was like, I love this. And then, I'd go out and play, and I enjoyed that too. And and then the one big difference with me deciding to keep going on with it, and I was just very fortunate, is that I have talent. It came natural. I was good at it. Nothing before in my life was that ever the case. I'd always grown up, when I was playing sports and stuff, the best of us, the best athletes, they glide. It looks effortless especially when they're playing against those of us that don't have that kind of talent. And we look laborious as we're moving around a basketball court or a football field.
Yeah.
So I never had that, and I knew what that looked like. And then in the music thing, I was like, I think I have like that thing. Like I'm gliding
so
here
true,
in the
man.
music world. So it was just the perfect marriage of actually realizing that I had God-given talent for something, and then also the fact that I love it. I do enjoy it.
I had a relatively similar experience. I went to college for playwriting. I thought I wanted to be a playwright or a screenwriter. And it kind of a similar thing where I got 3 years and I just couldn't hack it, man. And the reason I couldn't hack it, I remember seeing a play that someone had written. They did like a reading of the play. And I just walked out of the thing the most bummed out I've ever been, because not only was the play brilliant, but I realized that this guy spoke the language of how to like write theater and stuff like that. He spoke it fluently, and I felt like I was like a first year study abroad student, for example, trying to speak Estonian.
Yeah. Yeah.
After like a month of Rosetta Stone. And it's like, man, this guy's fluent in this. It's going to take me 5 years just to be relatively fluent in it. And so to leave that and then come to music, and I was playing in bars in Chicago and stuff like that, and immediately realizing like, no, I'm fluent in this. Like I can play with the big boys, basically.
Yeah, you can feel it.
Yes.
Yeah, you had feel. Yeah, that's the magic sauce. And I feel like everybody in life probably has that for something.
Of course they do. Yeah, absolutely.
It's whether or not they're fortunate enough to be able to find that thing. I always like use the example of there might have been the best hockey player in the world born in like a desert country or something where there isn't even an ice rink within 3,000 miles, and be such a shame, because like if that kid ever saw the ice, then it would have been lightning. But I do think everybody has something in this world that they glide in, that they're natural at. It's just hopefully everybody can find it.
The tough thing I find now is when I'm talking to someone who's younger, who's just starting out, and I can see that they're not able to glide in, you know what I mean? That they are laborious walking around the field or stuff like that. You don't want to just come out and punch them in the face with like, hey man, this might not be your gig. Go to something else. But it's kind of tough not to, because the sooner that they can figure that out, the sooner they can get on to the thing that they can glide in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's tough, and tough. Everybody kind of has to find their own way. That was me. It just wasn't going to happen for me in football, and it just took me, on my own time and failing to realize that. And sometimes, if you're really close with somebody, maybe that's that's something that can be, a subject that can be broached with them, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's just not somebody's place to
No, I'm definitely doing it with my kids, but that's about it. That's the only ones I'm really going to lay into.
Yeah, definitely.
Not going to happen, bud. Not working out great. So you start playing. It's interesting. You mentioned early on you kind of had these influences that were almost like the Americana music version of like pop music, like kind of Mumford and Sons and Avett. But when you come back from Estonia, you kind of get into bluegrass world a little bit. West Virginia is a great place to get into bluegrass world, a little bit. So can you talk about some of those influences that started to work on you then? Who were they, and how do you think they affected the artist that you've become now?
So the bluegrass thing, I could sing it really well. So that's just something that kind of fit, and it worked for the bars because you have like DJs and then bluegrass bands and like the West Virginia bar scene for the most part. So at playing bluegrass, we could just play really fast and rip a bar show, and it would actually go really well. So that's something we could do. Doc Watson was kind of the big bluegrass influence for me when during that period of my life. And yeah, we just play a bunch of like old standards that, we didn't even know who the writers were.
Yeah.
Just go down the list on Google and just learn the lyrics. GCD, let's rip it. And we just play 3 and 4 hour shows, just throwing those songs out one after another.
3 and 4 hour shows?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And they weren't shows proper. They weren't ticketed.
Well, sure, but
cover at the door. But yeah, I did 3, 4 hour shows were really the par for the course for all from 2014 to till Seneca came out. So to early 2019, I was doing exclusively 3 and 4 hour shows. I couldn't sell a ticket, until my first album came out. So I never got to play the nice 90 minutes.
Yep, playing 90 minutes now to headline must feel like a breeze.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. People, they're like, is it hard? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, these days are great. I'm fortunate enough to have that perspective where, if I could, I'd play 3 hours now because I have enough material I could do that, but my voice wouldn't be able to do it. That's why I envy Springsteen. It's amazing. He can go out there and just let it all go for 3 hours and then do it the next night. I'd lose my voice, unfortunately, but I wish I could do that.
Are you stuck in a rut? Are you tired of listening to that Jimmy Buffett 20th Century Masters CD over and over again and need some new music? Are you sick of making hamburger helper beef stroganoff for dinner every night and you want something new to cook? What you are looking for, my friends, is the Enthusiast Digest. That's my monthly newsletter, which arrives in your inbox the first Sunday morning of every month, bursting with musical recommendations, poetry selections, recipes and cooking techniques for my favorite dishes, and items of general interest culled from the vast cesspool that is the Internet. The Enthusiast Digest is free to subscribe to. If you dig the poetry that you hear on this show and the artists that you're hearing from, you'll dig the newsletter because I approach it with the exact same sensibility of curation. Go to joepugmusic.com/newsletter today to sign up for free. That is joepugmusic.com/newsletter. It takes approximately 15 seconds to sign up for a free newsletter that will enrich the first Sunday of your month with a veritable cornucopia of new and delightful recommendations. That's the Enthusiast Digest, the first Sunday of every month. Sign up for free at joepugmusic.com/newsletter. With Charles on our program, the only choice for a poem to accompany him is unquestionably one from my favorite living poet, Steve Scafidi. He might not be the official poet laureate of West Virginia, but I like to think of him as the people's poet laureate of West Virginia. And this poem, though I do think I read it on an episode many years ago, bears repeating. It speaks beautifully of the place that Charles calls home, and also beautifully of life's brevity. It's entitled, The West Virginia Copperwing. An apple falls through the branches of the tree, and a green snake rises up, flying with little wings iridescent, as the evening begins in the orchard on the edge of town. 3 deer whisper, grazing in the lane. You could be 11 or 12, standing with a stillness you have never before known, a halo of gnats around your head, and this could be any year in recorded history of human life. No one ever exactly remembers this moment or the next. We find ourselves in a royal pause, and then we go on asking what's next. We fall towards sorrow and we forget. Someone captures the miraculous green snake with a net, pins it to a board. Someone sharpens a knife at the center of the earth, and it sounds like a wheel. Houses appear. Thousands of windows twinkle suddenly in the settling dark. Stillness, which was the god of being 11 or 12 on the edge of town just before someone you love calls you home, and home being the god of this place, disappears. All of it disappears, and you are left lost in the majestic green clockwork that is next. So you mentioned, so that debut album, Seneca, it's the debut album of songs that of original songs. This is around 2019-ish.
Yeah.
Can you kind of describe the writing process of that album? You know, you mentioned, it was kind of hard at first to get these songs together or in a place that you found suitable and good. Can you remember the first song that you wrote where you thought to yourself, damn, man, that might actually be a thing. I could maybe play that one.
Yeah, the first one I wrote that was half decent was a song called Soul Like Mine. Mm-hmm. I wrote that when I was 20, I guess I would have been 22, 21. I was 21 years old. And, after that one, I was like, man, that's not half bad. And that's actually a song that I re-recorded. And, it's on this thing I did. I thought it'd be fun to do that. But Seneca was, and you probably know this, Joe, because we're in a similar place in life. So I wrote Seneca before I had any kids. So, I'm also a new songwriter. I'm figuring out how to perform for people, and I'm just learning this thing as I go. Lots of hard lessons. Just meandering off the path, and then, course correcting throughout this 2014 to 2018 period. I'm just learning, like, how does this even happen? Because there was nobody to help me out. And so I wrote a lot of bad songs in that period of time, and then every now and then I'd write a good one. And that one, stash away, keep it, start playing it out, repping, getting reps. Playing in front of people. And then finally, it was December 2017 when we started Seneca. I had enough to do this little project, and my old band had fallen apart, for the reasons that so many, beginner bands do. Not everybody wants to do it for a living. And you got to go through the crucible to make it out the other side. And, folks don't want to do that, which is fine. So it took me, I'd say, the songs that were on Seneca were it was like 3 years of writing to get that all together. And I thought I was working really hard at that time. I was like, man, I'm writing every day, blah, blah, blah. But then as my first kid's born, now, my second kid, I realized, man, I was wasting hours a day on, throughout those years. When you get kids, it's a crash course, master class in time management.
Oh
And,
my
and
God.
now, man, I could have written Seneca in 2 months, with the way I can manage my time now as
100%.
compared to my mid-20s self, thinking I was working hard, but really just blowing 4 or 5 hours a day, you
Oh,
know,
easy.
garbage. So, yeah, that's kind of how it happened, but it has to happen that way for you
Yes.
to get better in time. Some folks, maybe they're born with that ability to just, be pretty efficient right out the gate, but mine's been a gradual learning process with becoming more and more efficient as a writer
Yeah.
over the years.
Well, it's a double whammy with the kids thing because yes, like definitely you have more time to waste, before you have kids, obviously. So you tend to waste it. But also, I mean, I think there is something to probably you can write songs faster now because you've been writing songs for 10 years. So you probably,
Absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
you had to have learned some tricks. I find one of the things I've learned the most is when to quit on a song. Like, cause it's not, I'm like, man, I would, in the past, like pre-kids or while I was learning to write, I would have spent like 2 days trying to get like a song that was a complete piece of shit perfect. You know what I mean? Whereas now I leave.
Just, toss it out and move on to the next
I heard
idea.
there was a quote by Elon Musk. He said the most common mistake that an engineer makes is perfecting a part that should not even exist. And I think that translates perfectly to songwriting in that sense.
That's a great quote.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah. And I still catch myself getting in the weeds on a piece of junk, sometimes, but
You got to, but hopefully the batting average of that is like a little bit less,
Yeah.
over time.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So Seneca comes out. It's interesting because that comes out like 2019. Then COVID hits. Our whole business is upended. It's hard to get kind of anything going. And then yet last year, 2022, as far as the music that I listened to, kind of like folk music and singer-songwriter music, 2022 was the year of Charles Wesley Godwin and Zach Bryan. Like you guys were, it seems like you toured for about 366 days last year. I think that's a correct number for.
Yeah, we're everywhere, bud. Yeah.
So kind of talk to me a little bit about, I mean, that's a crazy transition to go from first album coming out, COVID wipes everything out, so everyone's at home. And then last year, it seemed to me, following you from afar, like you were just going 100 miles per hour. Can you kind of talk about that transition and what last year felt like?
Yeah, the whole timeline, everything's been very interesting. It is unprecedented, and it's still to be determined whether it was a curse or a blessing career-wise. I'm not sure yet. We'll see. Maybe I'll get that. I'll be able to figure that out sometime in the future. But so Seneca came out in February 2019. Mm-hmm. I had no management or booking at that point in time, and I'm a terrible business person. I was awful at the booking side of things, but determined. So I would fill up my schedule with just garbage gigs, but those were the gigs that I could get. And for some reason, I don't know if this is good or bad, but I was like, I have these 52, and I got picked up by a booking agency 2 months after it came out. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, I thought that it was a good idea to keep those 52 gigs that I already had booked for 2019, even though so many of them were 3-hour like brewery and bar gigs that, paid crap and weren't going to help move this thing along anymore. But anyways, I thought that's what I had to do. So I spent so much of 2019 still playing those same types of gigs that I'd played the 5 years prior. And then mixed in there when I had gaps were some of the like first real deal shows. I got to go out and open for Ward Davis and open for William Clark Green and start playing listening rooms around the country and tickets. People were buying tickets. Yeah. Unbelievable. So that's kind of how 2019 went, and people were finding out more and more about it. 2020 comes along. I have a 5-week European tour. My son was just born in December, and it was terrible timing, but I just thought this is something I had to do. and I'd agreed to do it over a year before, right after Seneca came out. So in January of 2020, I head off to Copenhagen for, date one of a 27-date European tour, and I'd be coming home March 2nd. And I do that, and I go over there, and I was on the plane on my way over there, Joe, and I was like, what the hell am I doing? Like, I got a newborn at home. Yeah. My wife's down with her parents in Florida. Like, so they're helping take care of my baby. What the hell am I doing? Nobody's going to know who I am over here. Yeah. So I land, and I'm like going into this whole thing like really skeptical, just reevaluating my entire life. I was kind of ashamed, to be honest. And show one happens, and there's 125 people that come out. I'm like, what's this? This is crazy. Yeah. I didn't expect this. Go to Malmo. It's a sold out 200 person show. I'm like, what? And so it went on. The whole entire tour, I think I sold out half of them. The other half were full, and there were only 2 duds. Yeah. And sold out Stockholm 2 nights in a row. And I fly back March 2nd. And I'm like, wow, this thing's going to work out. This is going to happen. And all these dates start coming through for the rest of the year, all kinds of great opportunities and opening opportunities, in Texas and California and all. And then boom, I think it was March 13th, 14th, COVID yep. happens. And, that sidelines the rest of the year. So during that time, spending a bunch of time over at our family's place in Seneca Rocks, and I'm like, well, I got to do something here to keep this moving, because that kind of cut the legs out from under Seneca and being able to help grow that, because I was just starting to actually properly tour on this debut album. So all throughout 2019 and then that first half of 2020, I continued writing. And come July, I had an album's worth of songs that were all themed and connected and threaded together well. And so we went into the studio and we demoed out How the Mighty Fall. We recorded it in August, September. And, by the fall, I was sitting on album number 2 and just waiting to get back out there. And it was spring of 2021 when things opened back up. Everybody's, once that vaccine kind of became available, then all businesses were opening around the country, and yeah. We're back in business. So I'm going back out April 2021, back on tour, opening with for Ward Davis for a 6-week tour. We do that. In July, we get a full band tour booked, and July 2021, start going out with my full band, getting everything together for the second album, still independent, and we're just hammering away, playing rooms all over the country. Some nights are great, some nights are terrible. You know what I mean? We have anywhere from 250 people coming out to 15 people, and that whole thing, just ups and downs, finances, independent album, stress, the whole deal. And then that fall, Zach had gotten honorably discharged from the Navy to play music, and he reached out and asked if I wanted to open one show. And I was like, yeah, absolutely, would love to. Went out and opened for him for the first time in Raleigh, North Carolina, and then for whatever reason he liked us, and we did a good job, and he just put us on the rest of the tour. So we toured the rest of that 2021 tour with them. Had a great time. Both bands got along so great, and we all became friends and stuff that, when 2022 came around to get back to work and stuff, they asked us if we wanted to open any that we could. So, that's kind of how the whole thing happened. And then, during that time, it's just things kept growing and growing. How the Mighty Fall comes out in fall of 2021. More people finding out about the music, and it's just like this snowball rolling downhill, and just picking up momentum. And but then by the end of last year, it was insane. That's kind of how you're on the ground. It's just like every day is normal, but then you start, as the shows go, it's just bigger and bigger and bigger. But then the day to day, everything's the same, and you don't really know why it's working or what, right. But you just keep working, doing your thing, Well,
man, and I'll just say that there is something about that first band that you tour with really heavily together. Like you never get that again. You guys are going to have a camaraderie for the rest of your lives because of that. I have that with artists I toured with, almost 15 years ago now, that even when I tour with people now, and I love touring with people now and I make new friends now, but the first huge tour I went on was with this guy, Tim from Strand of Oaks. And it's like, there's never going to be another Tim for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we bonded so hard in that initial run. It's just a beautiful thing to see, man. I love to see that continuing to iterate and happen over time.
Yeah, yeah, we've definitely become, it's a lifelong, like you said, it's a lifelong connection now, man. It's just something that we'll always have and be able to reminisce on, as old men.
Yes, no, indeed, and that'll almost be as fun, I'm sure. What have you learned in this time? I mean, to have to keep a band on the road, you've kept a band on the road from, everything's opening up with COVID again. Some shows have 250, some have 15. Now you're doing opening runs, and those opening runs are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Now you're doing a headline run of your own. These are lots of different situations to not only do yourself, but also to be a band leader and to keep a band going through all those different things and to finance it. What are some of the things that you've learned specifically as a band leader, and what do you think is one of the most necessary qualities to be a good band leader?
Oh man, I've learned many hard lessons. I took my band out too early in 2021 and went broke in September of 21, and I could not make payroll. I remember I had to message all the guys one day and said, "Guys, I got nothing to pay you." But then the pre-order for the album was that Thursday or Friday. And once that came through, I used that and paid the guys, and we just barely made it. Had it been 2 weeks space, it would have fallen apart. So that's not good finances, Joe. But I was just going for it, and again, I just didn't. There's nobody to show me how to do this, and we're just trying to do the best that we could. Fortunately, it worked out. But what I always do is I try to do the best I can by my guys. Springsteen is a role model to me in this way, in the fact that he's been able to have the E Street Band for his entire life, and that's something that I strive to do. I'd love to have that. If it's up to me, I'm going to do the best I can by my guys, and do that and try to make that happen. Hopefully, we're all playing music together as old men someday. But after that fall of 2021, though, I'm very careful to never overextend myself. Now, I don't stretch out like that ever again. Like for instance, like right now, I could be in a bus right now if I wanted to be, but I'm not going to do that until it's just an afterthought. It's something that I don't even have to think about. So those are kind of the lessons I've learned, that, to take things, be conservative financially with these steps as things move forward, and to not overextend myself, and make sure that, everybody involved in my circle and my team and our families and stuff is taken care of.
Yeah. Sorry, we have a lag there in the audio.
Sorry, man.
How do you manage? You got we both have young kids. Doing this particular job is, in some ways, strangely very good for having young kids, because when you're off the road, and you can be around with your kids and hanging. So it's great. But obviously, there's the other side of the coin, which is sometimes dad is gone. How do you manage your responsibilities of your career and being on the road with your responsibilities as a father and a husband?
It's definitely tough. And these past 2 years, Joe, have been real hard. I was gone too much, but it was in hopes that it would pay off in the future. So, sorry, my dog's probably barking at a squirrel up there on the yard.
I think it's very on brand here that in your interview you have a dog barking in the background.
Yeah, you got bad Wi-Fi in West Virginia here, and then my hound dog's out there probably barking at a squirrel. But I've been gone too much these past 2 years, but in hopes that I'd be gone less going forward. And this year's been really nice. It's been I've still been able to cover a lot of ground, play a lot of shows, but I've been working like 1 or 2 weeks and then 1 or 2 weeks off. So right now is the start of, a second week off. I'm back at Red Rocks next Tuesday. So, and I've been off since the Saturday before last. So, I mean, how many dads get to just have like multiple weeks just home?
That's it. No, that's it. I got, some of my kids' friends or dads or very powerful lawyers. And I swear I end up seeing my kids more than they do sometimes because, they're gone, before the kids wake up and back, close to when they go to bed.
But it's, 30 minutes in the evening, You had that 30 minutes up 5 days and then, you got some weekends, but sometimes they're still got to travel for this or that on weekends. And but at the end of the day, like you said, though, the other side of the coin is those kids at least know that dad's like in bed, in the house.
And that's a big deal. Like my son is very...
His car's in the driveway,
Yes.
There's a flip side to that. I do my best. I have a 24-hour rule. So no matter where I'm at in the country, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to do this, if there's enough space between shows, even if I'm right in the middle of a tour, sometimes you get 2 days to get here or there or something like that, I fly home.
Yeah.
So even if I'm in Seattle, if it means I can be home for 24 hours, I'm flying back. And then I'll fly back out to the next spot we got to be. So that adds up, over the course of a year. There's little days here and there where it's a lot of effort to do and it wears me out. But, it adds up. Maybe it's 14 extra days that I was home that year that I wouldn't have been otherwise.
Yes.
So that's something I do, and I think that really helps, especially with me and my wife. It allows us to get that time together that we normally wouldn't.
100%.
But, yeah, it ain't easy.
No, but you're also look. Especially you had kids a little bit younger than I did. You're just at this point in your career where like you don't get a second chance to hit this window. You know what I mean? You get one. First of all, most people get 0 chances to hit that window. So you either get 0 or 1 chances. You don't get 2. So it's like you do have to hit this window, but I think it'll ultimately end up being this 4, maybe 5-year window where you really got to hit it. You're already halfway through it. You know what I mean? And then after that, you just have a thing that's so established that you can play it pretty much any way that you want to. And I watch bands that have it set up like that, man. They play it any fucking way they want to. And it's because they put that time in early,
Yeah, that's nice. And that's the dream. The dream is to bring the kids and my wife out in the summer times and be able to see sights, bring them over to Europe and get to do all that stuff with them. So, that's definitely the dream. And to get into that sweet spot of about, 30 to 50 some dates a year,
that's the number right there.
Working. I'm never going to be the type that just disappears for years unless there's something to do with my health. But,
right.
Yeah, no, but I enjoy working, so I'm always going to work some, but definitely, 100, 150 dates a year with, in travel days, 200 days gone or however many. Yeah. That's not what you want to be doing the rest of your life, and unless some people are wired different, but that's not.
Yeah. No, my vibe, I told my agent, I'm like, look, I want to do 40 to 50 shows a year, but if I sleep in my bed after the show that night, it doesn't count against the 40 or 50. That's the vibe right there.
Yeah. And so those are nice too when you play like, hometown or whatever place you're living in. Isn't that the sweetest thing ever? Dude. You roll back into your driveway that night after the show. I played the amphitheater down here in Morgantown last summer.
Yep.
And I live, up on the ridge, so I could put my car in neutral.
Yes.
Once I get out of my driveway, and I could have rolled down to the gig.
Ah, dude.
And then I just went back up that night and got in my bed. It was like the best weekend of work I'd ever had.
That's the absolute best. You were talking about your 24-hour rule, and I don't have one quite like that, but my rule is after I finish a tour that's a fly out, I always take the earliest flight I possibly can the next morning. So they're always like 5 o'clock in the morning. Mm-hmm. And I did one where I played in L.A. I get off the stage really late in L.A. I drive to LAX. I sleep in a hotel room at LAX for an hour, and then I take the 5 a.m. back. But the point is, I got to, that feeling of being able to coast your truck down and you're still there. This feeling for me was I played in LA and then 12 hours later, I'm sitting at my kids' school waiting for them to be let out so I can pick them up. And I feel like Bruce Wayne or something like that, because I'm like, no one knows that I was on stage doing an encore 12 hours ago in Los Angeles. I'm just another parent here picking up my kids. I love that. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Those like little, those mornings and things like that's some of the most magical parts of doing this job.
Yes.
Probably when I'm older, I'm probably going to forget. I'm going to forget a lot, and a lot of what things felt like. And I don't know how I'll remember the shows. Honestly, I'll remember the fun, bad ones, probably more than the average, but some of the most special memories will be like driving home as the sun's coming up, and being exhausted from some run where you felt like you made a couple steps forward, and you're going to see your kids and your wife. And you're in this. I'm in this point in my life, and you are too. Like where the kids are young, so you get you get the hugs when you walk through the door, and it's just that's probably the stuff that'll flash before my eyes. Someday is those kind of parts of this kind of life experience that we're getting to enjoy.
Well, hopefully that day when it all flashes before you, God willing, will be many, many, many years from now. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, my friend. This is really great. Thanks for being part of the show. We're rooting for you out here, man.
Thanks for having me on, Joe. I gotta say real quick how I found out about your show, and I really enjoy it, and I've been listening since 2018.
Nice.
There's a buddy of mine named Zach McCord who I write with. He's really one of the few people I've ever written with. And we just finished writing a song called Jesse, and as we were leaving, he's like, "Man, do you ever heard of the Working Songwriter?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "You know Joe Pug, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, he's got a podcast on songwriting. I think you'd really like it." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll check it out." And I started listening that day, I think on the drive back I was living in Athens, Ohio at the time. And yeah, ever since then, man, I've been a consistent listener, and I love the show.
Oh, I love that. This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. Use promo code TWS, the initials of our podcast, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. Charles Wesley Godwin's latest album is entitled How the Mighty Fall, available everywhere music is sold or streamed. If before we meet again you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.